Hello, 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 hello. It's your good friend, Wild Philosopher, here with another exciting stream for you tonight. And to remind you that fairies are real, I have with me Ryan Rose, and tonight we will be talking about the Nephilim.
AKA my mother-in-law. I'm just kidding.
You have to practice. Confucius says filial piety is the root of all virtue. Respect your mother-in-law. Respect your mother-in-law. He doesn't have a mother-in-law. Don't worry about it.
No, it's just a joke. Yeah, no.
He doesn't outing you as a virgin today.
What?
Sorry, unmarried, bachelor.
Yeah, bachelor.
Okay. So tonight we will be talking about the Nephilim. So the Nephilim, call it in a single sentence. The Nephilim are a rather obscure category of what would you call it, spirit beings.
I don't know. Well,
gigantesque.
Well, I would say like just I don't know, non-human entity.
Yeah, category of non-human entities found in the Bible. Specific, I don't think they're in the New Testament.
They're referred to. You could infer some references to the literature that contains them, but there are no outstanding references.
Yeah, I know Enoch gets cited, but I didn't think they were referenced directly. Isn't a big issue. Typically they're most especially associated with the Tanakh or Old Testament. They are mentioned briefly and enigmatically in Genesis, and then are dealt with at much more length, but still pretty briefly in the book of Numbers and in the book of was it 2 Kings? I want to say 2 Kings.
Yeah. Somewhere in the Davidic cycle.
Or no, 2 Samuel. My apologies, 2 Samuel. They are mentioned at length. 2 Samuel, it was probably the most infamous, but the most, I guess maybe the most meaningful is going to be in Numbers, which is paralleling texts from the ancient, paralleling in a, how do you say, a method like critical engagement to the neighboring pagan city or polytheistic city, of Ugarit. Mm-hmm. A powerful stronghold of Canaanite religion in the late Bronze Age, which is referenced several, or it and its theology are referenced several times throughout the Bible. Yes. Probably its later successors, though, because I know it had ceased to exist by the 12th century.
Yeah, it collapsed in the late Bronze Age collapse.
Yeah. The Nephilim are part of a broader cross-stratum of Mediterranean figures with parallels in several other cultures and arguably internationally. And tonight we're going to be presenting mostly on an overview of what these beings are and what they aren't. Because there's a lot of confusion, a lot of really weird theories. There's, of course, the usual strange academic theories, like that it's a reference to the judiciary. And then you get the equally weird theories in online circles, which think it's like some pan-alien conspiracy or whatever. Tonight we'll just be talking about what are the Nephilim.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ryan, would you like to start, or?
Yeah. So we can go to where they kind of first make their appearance, at least canonically, in the Bible. They're mentioned in Genesis 6. And, you have this kind of, offhand verse, or a couple of offhand verses, which, for a lot of, I guess, church attenders today, or attendees, it kind of gets oversighted. But you have this verse when, let me me see if I have a good translation here. Here we go.
Yeah, the best.
When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive, and they took as their wives any as they choose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh; his days shall be 120 years." The Nephilim were on the earth in those days. Other translations have the giants, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Now there's a lot, yeah, Gibborim, yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot going on in that verse, and I mean throughout the centuries, we're not going to go too deep into church views or any official position taken by any ecclesiastical order or figure, but needless to say, there has been a debate. I'm a bit hesitant to call it a debate, because there's actually not a lot to debate about, because there's a bit, but anyway, has been a debate that about what these figures are, and several contending theories have been put forth. One is that the most obvious reading is that they are the children of angels, divine beings, if you will, and men, resulting in, let's say, a hybrid race of beings known as, the giants, the Nephilim. People who are a bit too, I guess, uncomfortable with that view tend to opt for something a little less, I guess you could say, sensational from their point of view anyway. And they might say, well, this could refer to either divine kings or a group of kings of a sort, or perhaps it can refer to, there's the Sethite hypothesis that these are the righteous sons of Seth, which married into the daughters of Cain. Needless to say, if you're, those views, like I said, we're going to be discussing mostly what we think Nephilim really are, and why we think it's important we take this trajectory. They are not really any of those kinds of figures, they're not the sons of Seth. They are not divine kings or mortal kings, with at least with respect to the whole lineage, like sons of God. And we are going to defend the angel view, because that will impact the rest of our discussion here. That one is the most flagrantly obvious and supported by so much more external evidence and internal evidence.
So
yeah,
the skeptical view, the sort of divine king or judiciary view, tends to or derive from a misreading of Jewish commentaries. Jewish commentators typically refer to them as judges, and this tends to be how it's picked up by academics and more skeptical sources. But that's not because they're not angels. That's because Jewish commentarial practices are multi-layered. And Jews will typically employ 4 or 5 readings, often dozens, for a single passage. Right. If you look at other Jewish sources, for instance, they are unequivocally clear that the entities in question are angels. A very well-established view in Jewish circles. It's simply that for Jews, sometimes, if any of you are familiar with Hermeticism, you're the dictum as above, so below. This is very much a Jewish view, and thus the actions of the angels are refracted through the actions of the mighty on earth.
Yes.
So yes, the angel view, probable view in this passage. Certainly, this is the implication in the later Numbers narrative, which is going to be the next instance, which I think that one refers to the Rephaim. which are also
Well,
the Nephilim.
Well, it refers to the Nephilim, who are the descendants of the Nephilim, which I take to mean pre-flood Nephilim. They are the Anakim, I think, the Anakites. And then there are the Rephaim, which in the Deuteronomistic narrative, actually figures like King Og and Sihon are referred to as the last of the Rephites, which I think the Bible might be making an argument of pre-flood giants, because in Jewish lore, and in the Talmud, actually, Og is a pre-flood giant.
Yeah. He just survived.
He survived, and his brother may have as well. Or the other king. I don't know if it's his brother. Is it? I don't remember.
Off the top of my head, I can't remember. Yeah.
Yeah. But anywho,
I remember Og on his unicorn.
Yeah, Og is yeah. Well, and I think some of those passages which refer to Og as a pre-flood giant, he is the actually descendant of Samyaza, either his son or grandson. I can't remember.
Yeah. He's the descendant of Samyaza.
Yeah,
and that very, very parallels. Later, we'll get into Nephilim in which is thaumaturgic or magic, like miracle working magical combat. And you will find Semyaza and his children showing up again and again at the epicenter of ritual battles with the Nephilim. In the Qumran, the community was a mystical community that, what's the word for it? Prefigured a lot of later Christian practices.
Yeah. Well, they're like, I guess you could say, almost proto-Christian, proto-messianic apocalypticists and visionaries. Yeah. Very sectarian.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's certainly clear from the writing.
Yeah.
That's very sectarian. But yes, the Nephilim, the sons of God, marry the daughters of men. They produce children. These children are called the mighty ones, the Gibborim, or the Nephilim, which means, I believe, fallen ones.
Might also mean giant if you're agreeing with Michael Heiser's approach to the Aramaic root of the term. So it might mean fallen one, but also act like literally giant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Could have two meanings simultaneously.
Oh, yeah.
Words are amazing like that.
Yes.
But yes, produce the giants or the mighty ones. I don't say mystical. Like legendary texts that did not make it into the Bible routinely describe them as having covered the earth. Very much emphasize their arrogance and desire for conquest, especially of a sexual sort, and not always in a "please will you be my bride" type way. Eventually leading God to basically destroying the planet, turning it into a world of conquest, world of will Macht, a will to power, and then. I mean, you guys know what happens after, if you've read your first few chapters of the Bible. God goes, "Welp," wipes his hands together, and blows the planet up. Everyone dead. Rocks fall, everyone dies. The Bible edition. The Nephilim do not appear throughout the rest of the book of Genesis. And I don't think in Exodus. I'm trying to remember when Moses fights King Sihon of Og, who was probably one of the Nephilim.
I think it might be both in Exodus and Deuteronomy.
Yeah. Sorry,
possibly Numbers.
Yeah. It shows up in at least two of them. The next instance is Moses is leading the Israelites to the Holy Land. Sihon of Og gets in his way. They fight, and and Moses takes an axe to his knee, and Sion dies. Either knee or heel.
It was the heel for Og, at least.
Oh, my bad. It was the heel. He takes and if you're sitting there going, oh, yeah, his Achilles tendon, yes, the parallel is intentional.
Yes.
Moses splits the heel of Og, king of Bashan. Sorry, I wasn't seeing of Og. King Og, king of Bashan. Sorry, brings him down. Israelites continue on their merry way. The implication is he's huge. I know there's. I only read Masoretic. Ryan is more the Septuagint guy. What was the height difference again?
The height difference, I think, from what I remember, was only with Goliath.
Oh, my bad.
I think Og remained the same, but it's Goliath who has the height difference. In the Masoretic, he's 9'6". In the Septuagint, as well as in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it was 6'9".
Cringe. I like my 9'6" giants.
Yeah.
Masoretic for the win. But yeah, how big was Og again? Just so
Og, according to his bedstead, he was around 13 feet in height.
Yeah. And so we mentioned giants. We'll touch again and again on the giants motif. Like, what is a giant?
Yeah.
Is it just a very tall humanoid, or is there something more going on there? Because this is going to become relevant if we start talking about giant lore in other cultures, right?
Yes.
Like, say, the Inuit or China. Like, is there going to be a type of parallel there? Sometimes maybe, sometimes not so much. Anyway, Israelites continue on their merry way. You know your Bible, they don't quite make it into the Holy Land because stuff happens. Moses dies, and he commands Joshua to carry on, continue on his way, and Joshua sends the 10 spies. Ryan, do you want to? You know the 10 spies story better than I do.
Yes. So that was in Numbers 13:33. Let's see here. And so there are spies. I mean, I can just read it here. So at the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out of the land. And they came to Moses and Aaron, to all the congregation of the people of Israel, in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negeb. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea along the Jordan. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. Then the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone to spy out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. And we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers. And so we seemed to them.
Yeah.
So that is one of the, so that there is a clear reference to Nephilim, the giants, dwelling in the land of Israel. Apparently, this group of Nephilim are Anakites who come from the children of Anak, which might be, from the looks of it, might be perhaps some type of folk hero, which, in distant memory, the people have recalled this figure. as someone to be wary of. Actually, I think a lot of figures in the Bible are pretty much like that.
Yeah.
Because we do actually have extra biblical evidence of figures like Balaam, the prophet.
We do?
Yes. Oh, yes. There's like 8th century inscriptions. I can't somewhere in Syria or northern Canaan, which do reference Balaam, but he's more of a pagan prophet who kind of who he's the mouthpiece for the Canaanite deities like El and Ishtar and Baal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is Balaam, son of Balak. I think that was his father's name, right?
And there's no weird Dode readings there.
Wait, who? What?
Oh no, there was it Stavrakopolu where they were looking at it's like David put this roadblock here. It's what it's like it could say Dode.
Oh yeah. Oh, Dode. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Dode. Wasn't David, guys. It was Dode. Sorry, in Hebrew it's spelled the same way for those who are sitting there going, what? Like, she's just reading the verb as in the vav, the verb, David as O, Dode.
Dode.
Yeah, same letter is read W in Arabic, which is why you'll see a lot of Arabs named Dawood, which is just David. It's just David. But sorry, that aside. That aside. All right, so Nephilim. Giant figures, mighty warriors, half angelic, half mortal, very proud, and consistently portrayed as the enemies of God and his servants.
Yeah.
That is certainly the case for the third, and I think probably lengthiest and most important, the battle between David and Goliath. For that one's going to be a little longer, so I don't think we'll read that one.
No.
And especially that one's also like super duper famous, anyways, right?
Yeah.
Goliath comes, he taunts the people. For those unaware, these are very typical Mediterranean war chants or war taunts.
Yeah.
You see very similar taunts used in the Iliad, not unrelatedly. And even actually, I noticed them when I was reading the Epic of Gilgamesh again last week. That Gilgamesh and there's a lacuna in the text, but it looks like Gilgamesh and Humbaba have a catcall battle where they call each other names before stabbing each other to death, as one does. But yes, Goliath shows up, he catcalls the Israelites and talks about how amazing he is and how awesome he is and how feeble the Israelites are. Very well-established Mediterranean custom, as Cleon Rar is the Greek term. And shows up and knocks him out with a slingshot. And he dies. F for Goliath. Goliath is also one of the Nephilim. You can clearly see every motif that we just sort of mentioned. The only one that's up for debate being his height. I know academics prefer the 6 foot. You said 6'5"?
Yeah, 6'9".
Yeah, because it's more realistic to believe in a 6 foot figure wandering around than it is to believe in an almost 10 foot tall figure. But we prefer the 10 foot tall reading here. We prefer the 10 foot tall reading. So, with that in mind, what is a Nephilim? Right, what is a Nephilim? Why?
In short, yeah. Well, okay.
No. I was just going to say, why does the Bible bother telling us about these things? Like, what's the importance?
Yeah. So, I mean, in short, they are the demigods. That is the very short way of, and They are the demigods. There's no getting around that.
Yes.
You can say, they are only spiritually giants, like giant in their ego. I mean, that's true, but they're also giant in size, and it's like, that's too mythological. Well, I'm sorry to say, but that's the worldview of the Bible. So
Yeah, they're
deal
the
with it.
demigod.
Yeah, they are the demigods. They are the demigods of the Greeks, the demigods of Mesopotamia, the demigods. Yeah.
Of
the heroes of
Syria.
Ugarit, the Rephaim.
The Rephaim were a hero cult.
Yeah.
And to be clear, that's not the word there isn't an insult. I mean, like there were religious institutions centered around. Hero was originally a religious term.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Nowadays, some guy, a firefighter, gives up his life saving 3 orphans from a burning orphanage. We call him a hero. Right.
Yeah.
The ancient Greeks, the ancient Sumerians, the ancient Mesopotamians did not do that. For them, not to say that they did not admire that sort of conduct, they just didn't call it heroic, at least not in the most emphatic or strict sense of the word. For them, the heroes were half divine, half mortal figures who were deified upon death and were worshipped at very specific shrines. The Hieroana is, I believe, the Greek term.
Mm-hmm.
With very specific regional religions. So in an earlier stream, I mentioned a Homeric, I think it was on this channel, it may have been on my stream, there's a tradition regarding Homer that when he was weaving the Iliad together, he combined legends from all of the areas of Greece so that everyone would have their favorite hero. That is a reference to the fact that all those guys you see prancing around in the Iliad and in the Odyssey and like stabbing each other full of spears are not a bunch of random, like we look at it from our perspective, like 3,000 years later as a bunch of random names. And, some we recognize, some became very famous, Achilles, Ajax, the other Ajax, Agamemnon, Menelaus, Odysseus. And then there's a whole bunch of others who appear for one line and get shanked, and they're never heard from again. And we're like, what was the point of this? The point of this was those were all very important regional figures. They all probably, we don't know this for sure, but it's a reasonably good guess, probably had regional religious epics. And Homer wove together these epics into one grand whole where everyone's heroes all showed up at the same time. This was I'm going to be very cringe here. This was the Marvel Avengers Assemble of Bronze Age.
Oh, man. I died inside.
You died, I know. So, but you remember all the memes about like the most ambitious crossover in history?
Yeah.
No. This was the most ambitious crossover because it involved the regional divinities, the demigods, who were worshipped, maybe not as gods, but as semi-divine, of like 500 different regions, all put together into one work, which was magisterial, for the record. The absolute, Homer, genius. Yeah, like the sheer memory, skill, strength it took to compose that poem, practically unrivaled in human history.
Yeah.
Absolute genius. Absolute genius. Like, lovely work. But yes, the Nephilim are they're the demigods. The Bible, one of the mistakes people fall into in the Bible is they look at it with modern eyes and they try to shoehorn this divide between, something called monotheism and something called polytheism.
Yeah.
Right. Not to say that the Bible...
Because, the term demigod can be a little unsettling because of what that implies for monotheism, but we'll get into that.
Well, I've mentioned before on this channel, monotheism is not the abrogation of a whole bunch of random gods in favor of one god that we happen to like. It is the worship of the supreme being. And the Bible sees no contradiction between such a worship and the existence, but not worship of, a whole bunch of other. Not even a whole bunch of other divinities. They're just not other divinities. There's no comparative framework between them and God. Right.
No.
It would be like comparing, say, King Charles III to like your friend who you call king.
Yeah.
Like king behavior, man. Like he's not a king. The other guy.
Well, the term sons of God is a term of royalty. So I'd actually prefer the term like maybe lesser lord, like a feudal lord.
Yeah, the Hebrew.
I think that's a better, yeah.
The Hebrew is prince.
Yeah, well, yeah.
If you look at texts talking about I know this may have sounded foreign to some of you listening now. Let's just be kind of blunt that in the transitionary period between polytheism and monotheism in late antiquity, so when after the birth of Jesus, when people were walking around, this was a very well-established feature of the Bible. People, at least Jews, did not take it for granted, and the figures that we call like pagan gods were referred to as the Sarim, the princes, by Jews. Right.
Mm-hmm.
This is a thesis academics call the Divine Council, and it is the notion of a council of divine beings who take their orders from the supreme being, God.
Yeah.
Which you can see in the first portion of the Bible where God says, "Let us make them in our own image."
Yeah.
Which may be God referring to himself with the royal we, but it could very well just as easily be referring to the Council of Divinities.
Yeah.
Which isn't really an that isn't a surprising reading, because you remember, like, Jesus says, "I say to ye are gods," and compares man to the angels. Right.
Yeah.
There's several different categories of angel throughout the Bible, throughout the New Testament. There's the messenger spirits, like the angelos, or the
messenger gods, yeah.
Yeah, but which are probably I think those are derived from Sumerian viziers, but that's a side note.
Sukal, yes, I think. Well, the Sukal, as they are called, there have been some comparisons between that and the biblical idea of angels, which is the attendee gods.
Yeah.
I don't mind that comparison. Well, the term Malachim is also it's a class of divine being in the Ugaritic hierarchy. They believed in angels. The Malaks, the messenger.
Yeah. Well, yeah, a whole bunch of pagan or polytheistic texts, and then you get like Plato becomes an archangel, and people summon him in seances. Things were lit back then. This is real fun philosophy hours. Forget reading Plato. We're going to summon him with our Ouija board. But sorry, back on topic. The comparison here between, like, when Jesus compares man to angels, he's not talking about like messenger spirits. He's talking about the great angels, like the seraphim, the cherubim. And again, those are, in the context of the Bible, pretty clearly a reference to what we like the Sarim, the Sarim, what we would call the pagan divinities.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, not in all cases. But so the sons of God descend. There are numerous narratives that have come to us from the Second Temple period. So this is before the start of Christianity by several centuries, offering various mythical narratives about this. The so-called books of Enoch being the best known, but you also have the Book of Giants, which it survives in Qumran only in fragmentary form, but there's a 2nd century version still in circulation amongst Jews today in Midrash Avkir. And this is a much lengthier version of the book of what was it 2 sentences from Genesis? 2 sentences. And this one is the group of angels called the Watchers. descend out of the heavens. They are led by Semyaza and Azazel, or Azazel. There's a whole bunch of variant spellings here. Don't worry too much about it. Yes, this is probably the same figure as the prohibition on sacrificing a goat to Azazel in Leviticus. There's even a footnote on that in Ibn Ezra. The 11th century Jewish mystic, one of the last figures to practice, at least that I know of, to practice the Nephilim fighting arts. But anywho, the Watchers descend. They see man falling into sin, and they tell God, man is a sinner. Why don't you just, I don't know, blow him up and have the angels rule everything, because the angels are awesome. And God's reply is, well, if I sent you, you'd sin too. And they're like, bet. If you like to use some Gen Z slang, it's the basic. There's several paragraphs where they argue, and then God finally is like, you know what, you can do it, bros. And he sends the angels. He gives them physical bodies, because the angels don't have physical bodies. They have spiritual bodies, which is somatic, but in a different sense. He sends the angels down. I think it's instantaneously that they fall in love with human women. Like, it's not like they've been down for 10 years and then they succumb to their desires. They land, they see a human woman, and they go, It's just like on the spot. And then literally their pickup line was, hey, did you know I'm an angel?
I've heard that line before.
Yeah, that was it. Do you want to see my magic powers? So they convince the daughters of men to sleep with them, excepting there's usually an exception made for a figure called Istihar, who convinces. She says, well, if you're really an angel, why don't you show me prove to me that you're an angel by giving me the divine name of God, which you remember was believed to, I don't want to say give magic, believed to give access to the secrets of creation. And the angel gives it to her, and she uses it to ascend alive into heaven, becoming the planet Venus in what is blatantly an act of theosis, as it would be called by the Eastern Orthodox nowadays.
Which is
because
a form of deification.
Yes, deification or angelification, deification. She undergoes theosis, becomes the planet Venus, because she successfully resisted committing a sin by sleeping with the angel. And this particular angel then repents and hangs himself halfway between heaven and earth. At least in some variants. In other variants, he goes on to have children with a different woman. And then hangs himself between heaven and earth when he hears about the flood. So at some point, Semyaza gets hung between heaven and earth. Azael is buried under a mountain beyond the farthest desert. The Black Mountain beyond the burning desert of Dudael. Anywho, they give birth to the Nephilim, or the mighty ones, who become the rulers of men, and they are very much interested in ruling for their own sake. Right, so we always talk about rulership as service. Right, the good king, in our in our vision, our imagination, right? The good king serves his people. His people do not exist to serve him. Right. This is what made Aragorn an amazing king in the Lord of the Rings. For example, and this is why people look up to leaders who serve their people. The contrast is a tyrant who serves himself. This is the basic division between good and bad kingship. And so long as the king is willing to serve his people, it is okay if the king doesn't always know what he's doing, because he is just as mortal as the rest of us. That was one of the more pro-Gilgamesh readings from, like, the Epic of Gilgamesh. I mentioned, he's a demigod, very much in line with the Nephilim archetype. There's several different readings of that epic in Sumerian myth. The most pro-Gilgamesh is the one I just presented. That Gilgamesh is on a quest to become a good king. He just needs a lot of guidance along the way. But anywho, they rule for their own sake. They slaughter at will humans and animals. Like, they destroy the soil. They commit various atrocious acts, including both the violation of judicial norms, which were very, very important. I mean, they should be important to us. They were very, very important in an ancient context. A lot of the Bible is like a lot of references to idolatry in the Bible. If you look at what's actually going on, it's people passing unfair judicial judicial decisions, and God punishing them for it. This is much of the stuff that goes on in Kings, for instance. It's why he destroys the line of Ahav and Jezebel. They pass unjust edicts as kings for their own sake. They kill humans. They kill animals wantonly, like not for food, for some useful reason. Terrorize the land, sleep with women against their consent, sleep with their relatives, which is a big taboo in ancient Near East. Still today, for most of us, still a taboo today. And so God sends, what's the word? The Nephilim become disquieted. They begin to wonder amongst themselves as they suspect there's rumblings of something from the heavens. So they pick. Do you remember what the name of the one they send to visit Metatron? Ryan? If you're talking, I can't hear you. Okay. Well, while he's working that out, they pick one amongst their number who I cannot remember the name of, but it's not immediately pertinent. Yeah, he's having technical difficulties. We will give him a moment. I am not hearing him. If you guys are hearing him,
Hello? Hello?
Okay, there you are. There you are.
Sorry, my settings were jank. Sorry. Yeah. Was it? So I think it was the giant that was sent for.
The one of their number, I think it was Og.
No, actually, I
Onan,
think it was. His name was Ohio.
Oh, hi. Yes, thank you.
Ohio.
I was
Ohio.
like, it's like can't be Onan. That's the guy who dies for.
Actually, I think he's Og's father, if I remember.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. They send Ohio. He basically goes on a vision quest. Like, the implication is he's ascending on this heavenly journey in spirit form to talk to Metatron, which is the Enoch who also underwent theosis earlier. Like, Enoch walked with God and was no more, is the reference to him in the Bible, and later on he becomes a very important figure in mystical tradition. Enoch ascends to heaven, becomes the angel Metatron, angel of the Lord, and Ohio ascends to heaven, and Enoch / Metatron has a discussion which amounts to, you done screwed up, buddy. God's going to blow up the earth, and the Nephilim are afraid to face death. This is a very, very. I know this may sound like a weird thing to bring up, like it's like fear of death. Something I think most of us have, but this shows up again and again in connection to the Nephilim, that they are terrified of dying. They want to live eternally, and so they run about in a panic. They try to repent, but don't know how to, at least in some readings. In others, they try to resist God. And then God sends the flood. The earth is destroyed, or washed away. And Noah sails along. And then, we can cut off the rest of the Noahic narrative because there are no, except for the one bit about Og surviving the flood by riding a giant unicorn. That is the last of the Nephilim in that particular narrative. So, the Nephilim are the demigods. They are physically defined by their might and their size, but we will again touch on that in a moment. And they are defined also by an arrogance that's not quite courage. I think it's tempting to look at the references to mightiness and warrior strength and see it as a reference to courage, but at the last gasp, they're afraid of death. And so being afraid of death, they are incapable of transcending it.
Yeah.
And they die.
Rip.
Yeah. In the later Enochic material, there's a lengthy visionary description of Enoch's visions to the Nephilim in the afterlife. We don't need to concern ourselves with that, which is I will stop myself from making an uncharitable remark and simply say that there are reasons Enoch is not scriptural. But yeah, that is the extent of the biblical narratives about the Nephilim. These often get misunderstood by people who want to apply it much more broadly. So sometimes it gets applied to the all like pagan gods. I see this. Yeah, that's not what the Bible is saying. The Bible is not under any illusions about the claim of the polytheists that their gods were gods, not mighty men. And then sometimes they also get equated with, last time, if you look at our stream on fairies to see us discuss the Nephilim and fairies, I won't rehash that now. The TLDR is they're not fairies. Is that about it for weird comparisons people make with the Nephilim?
Oh, alien beings.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're not survivors. Well, we won't say they're like Lemurians or survivors of Atlantis or Muans or some ascended master species, whatever. They're not aliens. I know Ancient Aliens tries to shoehorn that interpretation in. Or alien human hybrid. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, not alien human hybrids. Half divine, half mortal.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of the more theological angles of the Nephilim in a moment. Unless, did you want to talk about? Did you want to talk about the Greek and Mesopotamian material?
Yeah.
And then talk about the theological angles?
Yeah. Let's go over the Mesopotamian material because it's a little more closer geographically to the Bible and more, I guess, shorter in summary. And then we'll get to the Greek material since that's a little more expansive.
Yes. And much more complex.
Yes. So in the Mesopotamian material, the one demigod that really comes to mind is Gilgamesh, a famed hero, a king of Uruk, who may have allegedly lived during the early 3rd millennium BC, between 2900 to 2700 years BC, so almost 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. He is pretty much the principal figure of the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's named after him. There are several different versions. There's a Babylonian version, the Sumerian version, all with some minor and major variations. I won't go over them too much. The main, the main thrust of the narrative is Gilgamesh. I forget which version this was, but anyway, Gilgamesh oppresses his people. Then the gods fashion a wild man to be his foil, known as Enkidu. They wrestle, but before that, Enkidu, I think, lays with either before or after Enkidu lays.
No, so it might be.
Yeah.
So I might be better to clarify. The nature of Gilgamesh's oppression was committing improprietous improprietous coital acts.
Yes.
With woman, and engaging in arbitrary feats of strength that humiliated the men, who of course could not fight a demigod, and knew it, and kept crying out to the gods that the demigod who ruled over them should protect them and not be like beating them. It's a little ambiguous due to lacunae if he was physically fighting them or if he was beating them in some sort of physical sport game that he kept forcing them to play. And yeah, the gods create a wild man who is very much the opposite of Gilgamesh in every respect, right? Because he spends all his time guarding his people, which are a bunch of wild animals from the hunters, and hunters, of course, who can't eat if somebody's protecting all the animals, go and complain to Gilgamesh, hey, there's this guy. He's stopping us from hunting the animals. So Gilgamesh decides to send a prostitute to tame Enkidu.
Yeah.
He sends a prostitute. The prostitute, they do the thing for it was 6 days and 7 nights, or 7 days and 6 nights, one of the two. End of it, the strength has left Enkidu, his wild strength, but he has gained the power of judgment and become like a god. That's the exact wording. Or maybe, I mean, I'm pushing 3 lines together, but it's almost the exact wording. Very important Sumerian religious belief here about how reason is divine.
Yeah.
Not too relevant to what we're talking about today, but when we start talking about ancient philosophy in later streams, you'll see us drawing back to this epic. Because that one line went on to influence a lot of Western philosophy. Because Plato picks it up. But anywho, they send Enkidu. After he civilized Enkidu and Gilgamesh wrestle. Sorry for interrupting you. I just figured we should clarify the nature of Gilgamesh's offenses.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they wrestle, and then they're kind of a match for each other. So then they become friends. And then I think they go on a quest together to slay the giant Humbaba in the Cedar Forest in Lebanon. They kill him, and then
So it might be worth mentioning, like Humbaba was put there to guard the cedar forests by the gods.
Yes.
And they want to kill him so that they might gain immortal glory and renown.
Yes.
So to clarify as to why they suddenly leave and go off and shank the dude. So they kill him. Sorry again for interrupting.
No, it's okay. No, that's helpful because I have to go back and read it. It's been a while, but I
read it last week.
Oh, okay.
Maybe you want me to read? Sorry, do you want me to recap it?
You should.
Yeah, they come back. Ishtar. This is the 10th century one I'm reading from by Sin Lekiunini.
Okay.
Which is the newest. I know 10th century BC, the newest. Only 3,000 years old. Also the most complete though. A lot of the others, it's like 56 lines missing. I'm like, okay. And then it suddenly picks up. It's like Gilgamesh had a tree branch in his hand. It's like 47 lines missing. Scorpion man guarding the mountain, 36 lines missing.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a 10th century version by Sinleki Unini. Thank you, Sinleki Unini, for compiling that for us. They return with the head of Humbaba and the 4 trees of the gods that they've chopped down, and they use them to erect a temple. Ishtar is like, wow, Gilgamesh, that was hot and manly of you. Why don't you become my husband? And Gilgamesh insults her. So he doesn't just turn her down, he insults her. They're not necessarily unmerited insults, but never insult a god, right? Ishtar goes and complains to, it was either Enlil or Anu, and demands...
Anu,
yeah. I mean, both of them are pretty angry at Gilgamesh anyways.
Yeah.
So it's not 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Gilgamesh is supported by Shamash, the sun god.
Mm-hmm.
So she asks for the Bull of Heaven, which is a symbol of kingship, to be sent against Gilgamesh. After some argument, they say yes. Gilgamesh, Bull of Heaven, shows up, slaughters hundreds and hundreds of random Sumerians who go screaming into pits dug by the bull's horns / bellowing voice. Before the bull is cast down and killed by Gilgamesh and Enkidu, and then Enkidu chucks the shoulder at Ishtar. He chucks the shoulder of the bull. To show that he's not...
has ritual importance.
It probably has some importance, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, because it's a very... otherwise...
like the joint, I don't know. I just brought to mind, yeah.
Sorry, yeah, that's a bit of a diversion. Generally, when you guys see really weird passages like that, you should bear in mind that most of these texts were recited at rituals and temple rites.
Yeah.
And often what you're seeing corresponds to some action being done by the priests. The same with, like, in Heracles' 12 Labors, he's fighting a Hydra. All the modern retellings remove the bit where a random crab shows up and attacks Heracles and stabs him in the foot. It's like he's fighting this Hydra, he's beating it up, he's setting it on fire, and then it's like, and then a crab came and poked him in the knee, or the heel side, and Heracles stepped on him, and you're like, what's this for? And it has to do with religious rites to Heracles. But that aside, they chuck the shoulder at Ishtar, which makes her really mad, and the gods convene, and the thrust of their conversation is, you know what, we're going to kill Enkidu. Right. We're going, he killed Humbaba, guardian of the gods' forest, he chopped down the trees of the gods' forest, he murdered our bull, even though we sent it against him. So we're going to kill you, Enkidu. They tell Enkidu they're going to do this in a dream. He has the appropriate emotional response to being told that you're going to die in a dream, and then promptly dies. Gilgamesh weeps over his body and refuses to acknowledge he is dead until a maggot falls out of his nose. And then Gilgamesh is driven, I want to say driven mad by grief, but he wanders about dressed in a lion's skin, over the hills and far away, seeking how to defeat death. I will cut out the story. Like, there's a very interesting narrative, of course, in which he travels on his way. He eventually meets Utnapishtim, the Sumerian version of Noah, who survived the flood and was given immortality by the gods, and asks Utnapishtim. Utnapishtim says, after showing Gilgamesh that Gilgamesh cannot become immortal because he can't even conquer sleep, never mind death, Utnapishtim says, well, there's this herb that'll give you your youth. You can at least eat that. Gilgamesh finds the herb, but he evidently has not learned his lesson about proper rulership. Right? I mentioned the ruler serves his people. He is not served by them, because he plans to test the herb and see if it's like poisonous or not by feeding it to a random citizen of his country. So as Gilgamesh is sleeping, a snake, which is a symbol of protection and fertility and all these other sorts of issues in the Near East, eats the herbs, and then scurries away. And a very sad Gilgamesh returns to Uruk. Uruk or Uruk? I think it was Uruk.
Uruk.
Sorry.
He's the king of Uruk, yeah.
King of Uruk. Gazes on the walls and finally admits that death is inevitable, but at least he will have this great feat for all to gaze on for eternity.
Yeah.
The walls being the walls of Uruk, which he built himself, or commissioned. And they were huge and made of baked mud brick, which was very, very expensive, like time-consuming, expensive and time-consuming to build a structure that way. So, no, not a small feat, right? Even if the walls of Uruk no longer, I don't think they exist. You might
maybe. I don't know.
A lot of that stuff actually survived until relatively recently, and then was blown up. Like, what was it? Great Ziggurat of Ur lasted until the Iran-Iraq War of the 80s. And it was blown up while being used as a shelter for Iraqi soldiers.
Damn.
I think they built a replica on the same spot, but yeah, it's gone. Anywho, that is the narrative of Uruk, of Gilgamesh of Uruk. As far as I'm aware, that's the only major sort of demigod narrative to come out of Mesopotamia. There are several other similar figures, but they're all presented very differently. And it doesn't help that in the case of Mesopotamia, we're working with little like chipped archaeological records. Which means, for instance, in the narrative of Adapa, he ascends to heaven but fails to immediately gain immortality. And then he's like in the middle of talking and the text cuts off. And we know from ritual texts that the Sumerians believed he did in fact succeed in gaining immortality, and they called on his aid in exorcising ghosts. Very important ritual figure, rich in Sumerian exorcistic rites. So clearly there's a massive chunk of our narrative missing, given that he fails to get immortality in the part we have. The Greek material is a much more clearer, if unfortunately a lot more convoluted, because it's much later and is engaged in a lot of theological speculation about the importance of, well, I won't say the nature of heroism. Do you want to go into the Apollo and the giant slaying stuff, or should I talk briefly about Greek heroism?
Well, I think we should do that first.
Greek here, okay.
Yeah.
So we already mentioned, the Iliad, the Odyssey. I think those are the most well known. Most of you are probably familiar with the narratives to how Paris takes Helen of Troy as a result of helping the gods out. He takes Helen to Troy. All the Greek heroes set out after her. They have a big fight. A whole bunch of people die. Odysseus gets in by tricking the Trojans with a horse, a big wooden horse, and they destroy the city. In 5 seconds, that is about 2,400 pages of some of the world's most beautifully written religious literature. The Iliad there's a lot of conflicting interpretations of its presentation on heroism. I think the view that you'll see most often online tends to be influenced by Nietzsche, and this is the view that this is a positive narrative presenting Achilles and Menelaus and the like as figures to be emulated. Other readers, ourselves included, are much more critical. We think Homer is engaged. I want to say he's engaged in a negative analysis of the destructive nature of this sort of behavior, both on the individual, on his contemporaries, and on the relationship between man and the gods. We will probably save that for another time, because that's like a whole other stream in and of itself. And we'll instead confine ourselves to know, like, Hesiod is certainly very explicit about what I just said. He mentions that the gods created the heroes after they created the gold and the silver men, but that the heroes were on a spiritual par with neither. For which reason Plato called himself a silver man. To show how humble Plato was. It's like, yeah, I'm better than the Greek heroes. That aside, the next major hero narrative has not come down to us in literary form. It's come down to us archaeologically. The Temple of Samothrace, a mystery cult otherwise first attested in the writings of Herodotus in the 5th century, had a eschatology based around transformation from a mortal into a hero. So a form of divinification from the 8th century BC on. But the religion of Samothrace, I mean, it was Thracian, it wasn't Greek. This is in the name, Samothrace, Samothrakiast, Samothrakia. And they had very different religious tradition. The Iliad is Mycenaean, right? It's a Mycenaean work from mainland Greece. I know this may sound like a petty or academic dispute, but there were very profound religious differences between Sicilian Greeks, mainland Greeks, the Thracians, and the Phrygians. We just tend to lump them all together in our mind, which is a little unfortunate because it buries a lot of fascinating religious disputes. But starting in at least the 8th century, if not earlier, there's an argument. And this argument amongst the Greeks is, was this sort of narrative of heroism, the roaring your challenge to the gods of Gilgamesh and Achilles, and I use roaring, that's the actual term used in ancient Greek Cleon, is it heroic? Is this what it truly means to be a divine being, right? A demigod. And so the reason Greek religion is so complex, most people, like, Greek religion supplants the sort of Mesopotamian or Ugarishian understanding in the 5th century. So actually before Plato. This is often blamed on Plato, but it is in fact before him. The best narrative on this topic, so I'm trying to find the exact page in my, here we go. This is the hero of Temesa. Euthemos, that means good spirit, was a renowned athlete, a 3-time Olympic victor in boxing. Upon his return to Italy, he fought the hero. So this is just a generic hero. The story about him goes as follows. In the course of his wanderings after the capture of Ilium, Troy, Odysseus was carried, they say, by winds to different cities in Italy and Sicily. And among the places he arrived at with his ships was Temesa. One of his sailors got drunk there and diddled a maiden without her consent, a crime for which he was stoned by the local people. Treating the loss of the man as of no account, Odysseus sailed away. But the ghost of the man who had been stoned to death let pass no opportunity to kill inhabitants of Temesa, attacking persons of every age, until the people were preparing to leave Italy entirely. The Pythia, however, forbade them to abandon Temesa. This is the Pythian oracle, instructing them instead to propitiate the hero by setting aside from a sanctuary and constructing a temple in it, and by giving him a wife each year, giving him as wife each beautiful maiden in Temesa, with the implication being that the most beautiful maiden in Temesa did not, in fact, survive the experience. The people of Temesa carried out the god's commands, and in other respects were freed of their fear of the ghost. Now Euthemos arrived at Temesa at the time when the customary sacrifice was being made to the ghost. He learned the state of affairs and desired to enter the temple in order to look upon the maiden. When he saw her, he felt at first pity and then love for her, and the girl swore that she would marry him if he should save her. So Euthemos equipped himself, awaited the approach of the ghost, won the fight. The implication is he boxed it until it could box no more, and drove it out of the land. The hero plunged into the sea and disappeared. There was a fine wedding for Euthemos, and the local inhabitants were thereafter freed of their ghost. I have also heard something else about Euthemos, that he reached an extremely old age and, once again escaping death, departed from mankind in some other way. Other sources more closer to the life of Euthemos, who was a historical figure, specify that he walked into the water and transformed into a bull god. Which isn't a weird. I know that sounds a little weird. The Greeks thought the Greeks deified rivers as bull-headed men. Aeschylus is going to be the best well-known, but there's a whole bunch of other famous similar river divinities. Euthemos is undergoing theosis into a river god. That Temesa still inhabited in the present day, I heard from a man who had sailed there on business. That much I heard, but I got the following information from a painting I came upon, a copy of an ancient picture. It showed a youth, Sybaris, a river, Calabros, and a spring, Luca, in addition to the hero's shrine in the city of Temesa, and amongst these it showed the ghost that Euthemos drove out. The ghost's flesh was horribly black, his whole appearance was extremely frightening, and he wore a wolf's hide for clothing. The words on the painting gave his name as Lycus. This is from Pausanias. So this was it's a historical narrative in the sense that it's talking about a real person and is ascribing real events to him, whether even if people nowadays wouldn't be placing much faith in exorcising a ghost by beating it with your bare hands. We're just not as cool as Euthemos of Locri. But this is also a religious polemic. It is a critique of the vision of the hero as a sort of man out for himself, right, roaring against the gods, power, which we see in some of the other Greek wrestling narratives. I cannot seem to find it in my text here. Tragic. If I can. Oh yeah, Cleomedes. This is too. Hold up. Yeah, this is Cleomedes. At the previous Olympic festival, they say Cleomedes, which is not the preceding festival of the author, like the festival 600 years ago. They say Cleomedes of Astapalaia killed Icos of Epidaurus in a boxing match. Charged with foul play by the judges and deprived of his victory because you couldn't kill people in the boxing matches. He went out of his mind from grief. Returning to Astapalaia, he stopped at a school of some 60 children where he overturned the column that held up the roof so that it collapsed upon the children. The citizens began to stone him for slaughtering 60 children. And he took refuge in a temple of Athena. He climbed inside a wooden chest that was standing in the temple and drew down the lid. Although the Astapalians tried to open the chest, their efforts were in vain, and when finally they broke the boards of the chest, they found no Cleomedes, neither dead nor alive. So they dispatched men to Delphi to inquire what happened to Cleomedes. The Pythia, they say, gave them the following oracular response. Last of the heroes is Cleomedes of Astapalaia. Honor him with sacrifices, since he is no longer immortal. And so from this time onward, the Astapalians have honored Cleomedes as a hero.
I feel like you can make a Schrodinger's cat joke out of that.
Is Cleomedes in the box or isn't he?
Yeah.
These are religious disputes. These are two very different visions of what it means to live the good life, right? Of what it means to live a divine life. Sorry, olbios, a blessed life, and to achieve immortality, which is what's the word? Like the word used in immortality is also means both like immortality of existence and aphtito, to achieve aphtito, eternal remembrance / eternality. Thus, the English equivalent would perhaps be the word amaranthine, which is very archaic and known mostly to those who appreciate the music of hit Finnish metal band Nightwish, which has a lovely song called Amaranthine about undying love, right? Because it means undying. So, casual readers of the Bible, which are earlier Nephilic narratives, tend to think that what we have here is a dispute between, say, monotheists and polytheists, or between Jews and Greeks, because Goliath was a Philistine and they were Greek, or of Dorian and origin.
Yeah, of Greek descent.
Yes, they were of Greek descent. So maybe not Greeks in the Platonics, in the sense.
They were culturally, they acclimated to local Canaanite customs, but genetically they did have. Well, I mean, they were kind of a unique culture. They were a mix of the both.
Yeah. So it's sometimes read as the clash between like the Hebrew and the Greek civilization, or between the one God and the many gods. Both readings are false. Not to say that there aren't such narratives in the Bible. It is a clash between two very different visions of heroism. And it's a clash that did not only occur like in the context of the Bible, but it was also occurring in ancient Greece and in ancient Sumer. Because there were other traditions that had a much more negative view of Gilgamesh. And later Sumerian religious rites had very different visions of the quest for immortality.
Yeah. I mean, it also, interestingly, thinking about it, reflects on King David's character as king, and in contrast to the demigods.
Well, what did David call his the Gibberim?
Yeah.
He called David's soldiers are called the Gibberim.
Yes. But I don't think they're Nephilim. But are
they're not meant to be. It's meant to be a Gibberim means mighty men, right?
Yeah.
So when David called them his mighty men, it was a critical remark on
it's a count. Yeah.
Transfiguration of what it meant to be a hero.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily it's not the courageous aspect or the willingness to charge into battle aspect that was changed per se. It's the vision, it's the sort of view of pride and the vision of right rulership.
Yeah.
And this is why I mentioned Samothrakists had their own vision of hero, like transformation into a hero. They were famed for only exposing the only one who could be fully initiated into the cult of Samothrace, they were called the great gods of Samothrace, was one who had confessed his sins and vowed to live an honorable life. And Herodotus accredited them with introducing civilization into Greece, amongst other things.
Ancient Thracian Catholics.
Ancient Thracian, Thracian Catholics. Well, yeah, I mean, they actually set up, they had the big temple complex at Samothrace, but they set up little study clubs all over, their initiates had little clubs all over Greece where you would basically meet. Interestingly enough, they barred nobody based on class or race or gender. As opposed to other, so I shouldn't say race, ethnicity. Sorry, to be more temporally exact. Other mystery cults were limited to people from specific ethnicities or tribes, or to people of specific genders, such as Mithras was men only. The famous quote is "Mithras hates women." So it was a cult of soldiers. So not a real surprise there. Or, were like limited in age. And then some banned slaves. Mithras did not, Magna Mater did not, but some did. Samothrace took all. And they had clubs where basically anyone could gather, which was huge. Like ancient Greece had a very class stratified system. This shows up extensively in the Platonic dialogues when Socrates is disputing with the sophists, and they're talking about how are you going to protect Boethia, the slaves, the people under you. They mean the fact that the Socrates' servants as slaves do not have legal rights, and they are dependent on Socrates to avoid being abused and tormented by other Athenians. Right. Mm-hmm. And so when the sophists are defending the power above all view, they're trying to appeal to Socrates' emotions towards his lessers. And Socrates' reply then when he's talking about the importance of truth and justice is not merely a reply about for him, it's also a reply about for his lessers, or for his underlings, I should say. Anywho, they had little social clubs where you'd go and talk about moral teachings. So yeah, very much like early. I don't want to say like. I mean, you want to say. I don't want to say early Catholics because obviously grossly anachronistic. But there is a similarity in like Catholic. Is it Greek or Latin? It means universal.
I think it's I think that's Latin.
It might be Greek. It's an old word that means universal. Right, the Catholic Church is literally the Church Universal. That's its name. And so when you say somebody is Catholic, you mean that he's a very he's impartial. That's the other ancient use of the word is he's impartial, which is why if old translations of like the works of Confucius keeps talking about the importance of being Catholic. He's not talking about the importance of getting confirmation and doing the Eucharist. He's talking about not being partial or parochial. But yeah, it was a very complex dispute. Continued for, we're talking about 11 centuries before it vanished, because you have the Samothracians in the 8th century. I want to say, and then the last is going to be the Manichaeans. And I think we can talk about them briefly, because the Manichaeans really... I love Manichaeans. Manichaeans are... So yeah, these are the disciples of the prophet Mani. Anyone who's a very has read Augustine's Confessions or any other Christian texts is probably familiar with them. Anyone who enjoys Chinese martial arts may also know them, because for whatever reason, the Pope of the Manichaean Church is the protagonist of like every wuxia martial arts film. If any of you have ever seen the Ming cult in a Chinese martial arts film, that is a reference to Ming Jiao or Moni Jiao, Chinese Manichaeism. For whatever reason, Chinese fantasy authors in the 60s decided that Manichaean martial artists would be the either protagonists or antagonists of novels. And so even today, there's just like anytime you see like the heavenly demon of the Ming cult, that's the Manichaean Pope. That's the Pope of the Prophet, inheritor of the legacy of the Prophet Mani. Manichaeism was a 4th century Christian sect. Started a very eclectic group. Mani claimed to be the seal of the prophets, and he endeavored to prove this by bringing every prophetic text under him. He received his revelation direct from his twin sibling, the Holy Spirit. And his scriptures were I want to say convoluted mix, because that maybe he was a genius at syncretizing like Zoroastrian dualism, Sumerian polytheism, as in its 2nd century form, Judaism, Christianity, and one or two other groups that we may not even barely know of. And he propounded his own myth. Now, Manichaeism was dualistic. It believed in a world of light and a world of dark. Sorry, just getting a drink of water. It differed from it was not, however, a Gnostic sect. The Gnostics, one of the central articles of Gnostic belief was that the material world is evil, right? And we need to abandon the material world and return to the world of spirit. A belief that may have come from the Orphics, although I know some academics argue for a Jewish basis. Manichaeism did not believe that, in spite of what's often told. Manichaeism held the opposite view, that the god of light had created the material world to divest the sparks of light, human souls, from the power of the god of darkness. So God made creation to save us all from Satan, in more modern terms. And Satan wanted to corrupt the first man, so he's using, obviously not calling him Satan, but he sent his evil angels, which are going to be the Watchers, because Manny is directly borrowing from the Book of Giants from the Jews, and he's basically rewriting it. They impregnate the woman, but the nature of evil is such that it cannot give birth, so the woman suffers spontaneous abortions / miscarriages. The Greek text is a little weird, or was that Latin? And these become the Nephilim. Manichaean ritual practice, which was notoriously strange, it was all centered around eating a vegetable Eucharist on a trapezoidal table. Very convoluted and very fascinating. But the centerpiece was that they were reclaiming the sparks of light, the holy light, from the souls of the veggies / from people who had been corrupted, and from the grasp of the Nephilim. So they were engaged in a direct magical combat with the Nephilim, basically. Specifically, it was the Manichaean elect they had two levels. This was a very idiosyncratic belief, mostly unique to the Manichaeans themselves, but it did build off a very consistent narrative that was widespread amongst the ancient Near East, which is going to consist like Turkey, modern-day Turkey, Iraq, Syria, Israel, Lebanon, etc., Saudi Arabia. Like the Nephilim were evil spirits. They could possess you, and these would be the ghosts of the Nephilim slain in the flood, in context. They could possess you, and there were sort of divine combats microcosmically done as exorcists fighting Nephilim in theurgic rites. Theurgy being the acceptable method of miracle working, in contradistinction to sorcery. And this was done, Jews are the best archaeologically attested, because both ancient polytheists and ancient Christians thought Jews had magic powers, so they were more likely to hire a Jew for an exorcism. That was that. But there's also a whole bunch of, a lot of incantation. They're called incantation bowls. This is ancient Sumerian Ghostbusters, where you show up with your incantation bowls, which prepares a seal against the Nephilim, and attempt to cast out the evil spirit. And fascinatingly, the Sumerians themselves were trying to cast out Gilgamesh by this time period. Yeah. I know Gilgamesh shows up as a Nephilim in Christian texts. That's not.
Well, it's in the Book of Giants.
Yeah. But that's not
that's
just.
Pre-Christian.
Pre-Christian and then in Christian. As I said, that's not necessarily a critical remark on Sumerian religion, because by that time, the Sumerians had transformed their own understanding of heroism themselves. Not to say that there aren't critical remarks about Sumerian religion, just not in the Bible, just that it's not that. And so, you exercise Gilgamesh with your magical bowl, the 2nd century exorcism rite. And that went on to profoundly influence Manichaeism and their unique anti-Nephilim combat rites. So that takes us, we've been talking for an hour and a half now. We covered what are Nephilim. We went over, we did not finish Greeks. We did not, because you didn't talk about Apollo the Giant Slayer.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not. I mean, there's only a weird, there are just a few episodes in in Greek myth where Apollo slays several giant figures. Sorry, oh gosh, coughing.
No worries.
Those include the giant Titaios, who is mentioned several times in the Iliad. Actually, I think in Homer or in the Odyssey as well. He was a giant hero. He was the son of Zeus. And, well, according to some traditions, he was the son of Zeus. To others, he was the son of Gaia. Regardless, he was a very violent giant. And he tried to make a non-consensual attempt on Leto, who is Apollo and Artemis's mother,
Yes.
mortal mother. And so Apollo, as a means of defending his mother, killed the giant, and he went into Hades to be tortured. His liver was to be removed every day. So there's kind of a parallel with Prometheus there. Then there is also the giants, the Aloidai. They were twin giants, sons of Poseidon, at least in some accounts, and they attempted to storm Mount Olympus and wreak havoc on the gods. They managed to entrap Ares, but in some traditions it was Artemis, and others it was Apollo. In either case, they sent a stag to run in between the giants, and the giants, being the dopes that they are, attempted to skewer the stag as it ran in between them, but they only ended up stabbing each other, and they died. There's also the account of Orion, the giant Orion, who could walk on water. He was he was slain by Artemis for his misdeeds, and yeah, there's a lot of, maybe not a lot, but there are some interesting traditions on sort of the general, like the giants in this case, like Gigantes as they are called in Greek mythology. They do parallel the demigods in a lot of ways. They have a cruel and unusual habits. They're violent. They devour. Sometimes they're cannibalistic. Or actually, a lot of the times they are. You see this in the case of the Cyclops and the Lystragonians.
It was huge for the Orphics.
Yeah.
That the giants were cannibals and therefore signified the appetites of the flesh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This being a very ascetic religion, Orphism. Actually, funnily enough, so Orphism, 5th century Greek religion, profoundly influenced Plato, offered a number of very fascinating religious texts and writings before vanishing mysteriously sometime. We don't even know when. It may have existed to the 5th century AD. It may have died out 2nd century AD. Conceived of the initiate as a satyr. So in Samothrace, the initiate became a hero. In Orphism, he became a satyr. If you look at the Orphic hymns and look at the hymn to Pan, they describe Pan as a cosmic figure. Funnily enough, the satyrs themselves were also very anti-giant. Eratosthenes in the 4th century has an absolutely... It's kind of... I mean, every narrative involving satyrs is always funny, because they're satyrs. It has to be funny. If it's not funny, it's not satyrs, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, when the giants announced they were going to overthrow Olympus, the satyrs promptly mounted onto their donkeys and charged the giants, actually. The giants fought an entire satyr cavalry wave on donkey back. Dionysus said, yeah, so the satyrs, it was an ideological myth to explain, I want to say Capricorn.
Yeah, because he dived into the water afterwards.
There's a few different narratives, but yeah. But one of them was that the satyrs charged the giants on muleback in history's funniest cavalry wave. But yeah, actually, while we are on the top, so you mentioned giants similar to the demigods in many respects. You can see some of the parallels, but in other respects, we may, like, maybe in a broader sense, do we want to say that a Nephilim is equivalent to a giant? To transition here.
Well, maybe not all giants are Nephilim, but all Nephilim are giants.
Well, yeah, like there are a lot of giants elsewhere in folklore. Some of them are very much like obviously have nothing to do with the Nephilim. A while back I told the story of Ji Kong, a Taoist immortal and revolutionary of the 2nd century, who famously received the popular Guqin tune Guanling song from a 10-foot tall giant in his dreams. And then you can sort of get into some of the Inuit giant lore is interesting. Inuit giant lore isn't, and we're going into this because if you guys look up Nephilim, you'll find a lot of accounts, I guess, talking about like Nephilim are giants, guys. And so when you see giants, they'll think that, oh well, this must be a Nephilim. And the interesting thing about the Inuit is if we're talking about parallels that like the Inuit would recognize, so internal parallels, like the Inuits have 2 types of giants. Would that be a fair way to categorize it?
More or less, yeah. They had two types of giants. You had the great giants, which were typically regarded as being almost as tall as mountains, and they could wade through fjords like you going through a puddle or the ocean.
Yeah.
And they could
whales
pick up
were catfish.
Yeah. Then there's the lesser giants.
Here we go.
Which were only
sorry, transmission.
They were only like maybe 10 to 14 feet tall, 12 feet tall.
Yeah, and the Inu Garu Ligasaguit, to try and pronounce that properly. There's the is spelled with a J. And they were, I don't want to say unilaterally seen as prideful and cruel, but I have yet to see anything on them as a positive figure. And I have read collections of Inuit folklore from multiple different countries across several centuries. In contradistinction to the great giants, maybe much more positive, such as, Inukpasuksuk adopted a human. Inukpasaryuk married a human. Funnily enough, they apparently had a very happy marriage. I appreciate the Inuit oral tellers passing that detail on. Inukpasaryuk and her husband, what was his name? It was like an Inuit word meaning like tiny guy. Wikoluk. Yeah, little husband in Inuktitut. This is my husband, Tiny. And yeah, she was the one who would catch whales with her bare hands and call them catfish. There's a very famous story where she told her husband she wanted to hunt a polar bear, and tell him if he saw it, tell her if he saw any, and then she goes to bed and he sees a polar bear. So he wakes her up. She says, "Why'd you wake me up for this? This is like a rat." And she just chucks the polar bear. She just picks it up, just chucks it away, like the way you might. I guess most of us probably wouldn't grab a rat, but yeah, like it's like ooh, just throws it away. And though he's sleeping, and she's like, "Don't call me for any small fry. Call me for a polar bear." And so she goes back to bed, and her husband, little husband Wickelick, is sitting there like, what am I supposed to do? As all these totally normal polar bears that she thinks are like rats go wandering about. And then he sees a polar bear the size of a glacier. Like several, like, I want to say like several hundred feet. And he's like, he wakes her up and she's like, finally, a polar bear. Yeah, those are not Nephilim. They're not comparable. They don't fit the Bible's archetype.
No.
English giants probably would. They are mostly of a similar bent. Same with a lot of ogres. Ogre is a sort of English term for a massive cannibalistic man usually with magic powers. Ogre is pretty comparable. But a lot of the other stuff, not a giant. Or not a Nephilim, sorry. Also not a Nephilim is heroes in general. I know because we compared it to the Greek rite of the Heroon, we are not the first. Like Nietzsche very famously uncritically sort of equates the biblical Nephilim with the Greek hero. This is true in maybe in a Homeric sense, but it's not true as it regards later senses. It's also not true that the Bible is encouraging us to abolish heroism in favor of like just slavishly serving God. This is not the biblical vision of what it means to serve God as a guardian, as a hero. Like I already mentioned, David called his troops the Gibborim, the mighty men. He may have killed Goliath with a sling. He certainly did not use a sling later on. And if you're talking about reading the Bible as a whole, it is very obvious that the Bible does not conceive us as simply slavishly following God's commands. Much of the rest of the Bible is involved with like extensive questioning of the Lord's orders. Same goes for Plato. Like it's not the Nephilim are maybe in some senses equivalent to the hero cult. Very, very of the Bronze Age. In another sense, should not be equated with heroism, nor is any depiction of a courageous man who stands up for what's right remotely on a par with Nephilism. You're telling me people think superheroes are the Nephilim or something?
Yeah, well, they think all the references to mutation, augmented abilities, that's all derivative of a Nephilic archetype, and they think that's just a form of modern Satanism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. If you had a hero a hero who was only interested in his own self, and did nice things for others for the sake of his own glory, and maybe didn't care about the harm he caused, that might be comparable.
Yeah, well, that actually matches the Heroes in the Boys series. That's better describes them.
Which is somewhat ironic given the religious inclinations of the writer.
Yes.
But as opposed to, say, a hero who is deeply concerned, like Superman.
Yeah.
Superman is certainly no Nephilim in any sense of the word.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he's not literally a Nephilim, but he's also not there's no the paradigm of Nephilism.
Yeah.
Is not involved. So yeah, that's the brief description of Nephilim. Did we want it? And we sort of how much longer did you want to go, or how much farther?
maybe 30 more minutes. 30 more
And then
minutes.
yeah, we can probably well yeah, we sort of hinted about Nietzsche.
Yeah. Oh, I never got around to discussing Syrian Nephilim or the Rephaim.
Was there anything unique to mention, or?
So, I mean, I will mention that the term Rephaim in the Bible is shared with a very similar other similar culture. Again, the Ugaridians use the
Yeah.
term to describe their deified ancestors, but it also referred to like the warrior kings of past, specifically warrior kings related to the then current dynasty of Ugarit, which were Amoritic in nature. Um,
As in the
the
Amorites.
Yeah, the Amorites. Yes.
Sorry for those who are sitting
Yeah,
there wondering what the heck is he talking about.
yeah,
The
yeah, the
Amorites.
Amorites. Also, the ancestor of a lot of later Babylonian dynasties. So the Rephaim. So I'm taking most of my stuff. You can if you want to check out more of this, you can pick up Stories from Ancient Canaan by Michael D. Coogan. That's a kind of good rundown on some of the myths or stories we've collected from Ugarit, from the city of Ugarit. A lot of them are lacunic, so they're not all the tales are mostly still incomplete, which is unfortunate, but alas. But we do have enough to go on. And there is a text in the, well, there are several texts that do mention them or involve them. One, there's the hero Danel, which many seem to think is the Daniel mentioned in Ezekiel, which I think is ridiculous. But anywho, there's the man Danel, who was a king of, oh man, I can't remember where. But anyway, he had a son by the name of Akkad. Danel is, in other texts, ritual texts, he is referred to as Rephaim, or one amongst the Rephaim. And there was a cult of the dead in Ugarit dedicated to the Rephaim. So there are probably some connections between that and later Greek hero cults, almost certainly.
Yeah. Okay. But
Yeah.
nothing else to add on from there.
Well, yeah, just that,
Like,
King Og is most likely being conflated also with another figure from Ugaritic myth. The writer, Mike Coogan, goes on to state that in the Rephaim text, there is a deity known as, I think, the god of eternity, named Rephau, which is, again, that's what, that's a reference to the Rephaim, who ruled at Edrei and Ashtaroth, which is where Og's kingdom was and where he ruled. So he is being specifically associated. And again, you actually see that in the text, the Rephaim, the Syrian.
Yeah. So
there is actually there is, what further confirms this is there is actually a parallel, a narrative thematic parallel between the episode of Ishtar getting rejected by Gilgamesh and going to complain about it to Anu. There is a parallel to that in the Akkad myth, in which Anat, the Syrian goddess of war, approaches Danel or Akkad, offers him immortality in exchange for his bow, but he rejects her, stating that he is destined to die, and she goes to complain about it to El, the head of the Canaanite pantheon, and threatens to kind of beat his face in unless he does something about it. So there is a parallel, which just helps to support the thesis. So almost.
Okay. Yeah. Did you? I guess. Yeah. We'll continue on then, because. But I guess the only other thing to maybe mention. Did you want to go over the bloodline links between Og, Achilles, and Alexander the Great, or? Or nah.
Now I'll save that for later.
Yeah, I'll save that for later.
I have brought that up before. Yeah, but we can touch on that later.
Well, yeah, you've never not on stream.
Not on stream. Oh yeah,
not on stream. Okay, that's all right. Yeah, I will leave the tantalizing links between the biblical king Og of Bashan and Alexander the Great
Well, and
from
Achilles.
Alexander's own mouth.
Yeah.
Alexander's own mouth for another time. So yeah, the Nephilim sort of they continue to be important in Manichaeism. They continue to be important in Judaism. For centuries and centuries. The last major text I know of to talk about this narrative was composed by the 13th century mystic Rabbi Eliezer of Worms in Germany. As far as I'm aware, they have very little impact on Christianity after the 4th century. The heavy emphasis on euhemerism in the church fathers meant that they didn't get used as an explanandum or an explanation for heroes as much as they possibly could have been. And I don't really see, unless you know of any medieval writers who talked about the Nephilim in depth.
Not that I know. Following, because of Augustine's influence. I mean, they probably did not have a fun view.
Wait, does Augustine deny that they were?
Yeah, well, he was a former Manichaean, right?
Yeah. Oh, Augustine.
Yeah, and he's like, actually, these are Sethites because giants and angel babies is weird.
That sounds like an Augustine move.
Yeah,
that's sad. He was the same guy who wanted to get rid of theurgy because it was. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Augustine. Okay, which also again established, yeah, you're right, probably not influential in the medieval period. So the Nephilim go to sleep in the West. They don't really appear again for 1,000, 1,300 years or so. The figure who picks them up and makes the most out of them is a little-known guy from the 19th century by the name of Friedrich Nietzsche. Yeah. Nietzsche, he picks up, he recognizes the biblical parallels. He picks up, and he always talks about, the ancient Greeks and the Hellenics. And he really goes on and on about Dionysian, in spite of the persistent negative depiction of the heroes in the Dionysian corpus from late antiquity. But Nietzsche, his Greek or Greece is very much Homer. Right, very much. He was he's known to us today as a philosopher, but it's always worth remembering he was a classicist first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
His main area of research was, it was the Iliad. He was a specialist in Homer. And when he came up with his notions of the will to power and the aristocratic versus the slave morality, he was consciously, openly, and explicitly adapting what he saw as the Homeric code to our own day and age, in contradistinction to what he condemned as slave morality, which famously consisted both of Socrates and his philosophical descendants, the whole of Europe, and on the one hand, and the Jews and their philosophical descendants, all of Christian Europe on the other. This will to power, went on to be hugely influential, both in the early 20th century, but even on from that, and continues actually to affect us today, because a lot of Nietzsche's arguments about ressentiment and how all thinking is rooted in desire for power went on to influence most of these academics.
Most of what, sorry?
Today's academics.
Yes, okay, sorry.
Yeah, today's academic. Yeah, this is this is a scholarly channel. We like intellectual activity. We are not quite as fond of the university system.
No.
I'm going to be blunt here. We are not big fans of the university system, and the Nephilic arts. No, being passed around through the academy are a major reason, because of how somebody acting according to them treats other people's. Going to see how, walk out your door, turn on your TV. But yeah, Nietzscheism and the Homeric Nephilic code very much spread throughout, let's say, but spread throughout a lot of the universities today. And then I think the question is, as thinkers concerned with the Nephilim, whether we're concerned with them from a biblical Christian perspective, or because we're like Greek neo-pagans and we're concerned with developing an actual accurate image of ancient Greek religion, other than Nietzsche. How might this negatively affect us? And how is it affecting us today? Because there's a lot of Nephilism going on out there. This is so. Yeah, did you have anything you want to say here, Ryan?
On this topic, no. I'll let you take the floor.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess I won't say I said my piece. I certainly hinted my piece. So the Nephilic. The set of beliefs associated with the Nephilim, right, it was, as I said, it was a very distinct perspective on power as personal power, personal desire for control. Right, it is a rejection of what it might mean to be a true king, to look out for the people below you. It's a rejection of, say, the vision of heroism that we might get from Tarzan or Superman, where we willingly wrestle a lion with our bare hands for the love of a beautiful woman. And it is the notion that we do these things instead for ourselves, for our eternal resounding glory. And by extension, say, is for our eternal resounding glory, our control, power. I think the immediate ramifications are rather obvious, right? It makes heroism unintelligible. And by this I mean actual heroism. Right? Great courage in the service of what is right. It makes genuine rulership unintelligible, because we're now out for ourselves rather than for the people. For the subjects of the king, like no more King Arthur. And it also makes, even just conventional relationships between people, friendship, love, unintelligible. Right? This all collapses. And it's potentially a very profound problem in the way that, say, some big blockage or explicit thing is not, because it can sneak in. I mentioned that the early Christians were not, they didn't really write about the Nephilim, they exorcised the Nephilim. You showed up with bell, book, and candle to get rid of them, and this was because the Nephilim entered through the heart. Entered through the heart, through the soul, and then they poisoned it from within. And you can sort of see this, we noted earlier, the pagan gods are not Nephilim. At least accepting some who were simply like Heracles, becomes a god. He would have been a Nephilim, right? Or Nephil. Singular. Heracles was a Nephil. Sorry, that's the singular.
Well, Nephilim can be singular, I guess.
Okay.
It gets treated as, whatever.
We will lay aside the ancient Hebrew etymology. The pagan gods, however, were not the Nephilim, and they sometimes get treated as if they were. And our main issue with that is evil is not going to try to corrupt you by getting you to do obviously evil things. Right? It's going to try to corrupt you by getting you to accept evil things as good. I'm not going to tell you to commit some atrocity because committing atrocities is good. I'm going to tell you to commit some I'm going to tell you that you have a good reason to commit that atrocity. Right?
Yeah.
It's the no, like, I don't know, for your glory would be the old traditional way. Sorry, got a message from someone. But in our time, it'll be like, oh, well, you don't need to worry about this. You're doing the right thing. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That is the voice of the Nephilim, not pagan gods. And so you ask, like, why does it matter if we're establishing, that Apollo is not a Nephilim? Because Apollo kills Nephilim, for one thing. But because the threat of the Nephilim are not in that they want you to worship Apollo. Right? They're in sort of pride and in cruelty and in bellowing out your triumph before you've actually won.
Hey, you know what they say? Pride goeth before the fall.
Pride goeth, yes.
That is a Nephilim maxim.
Actually, is that line related to the fall? Would you happen to know?
I'll go check.
Yeah, I have some. Well, it doesn't matter I have some books on idioms. I might look into it later.
Oh, that's Proverbs. That's Proverbs. Proverbs 16:18.
My bad. Okay. I mean, if you believe in the fall from a Christian level, you can say Solomon is referencing it there. Yeah. I don't, but hey.
Well, that could be just an anti-Nephil verse.
Yeah.
Like pride goes before destruction. Yeah.
Pride goes before the fall. And you can see it today, like, in terms of how, it corrupts good governance. It corrupts our heroism, and it corrupts just our simple relations with other people.
Yeah.
That's all I want to cover. If there's anything else you want to go over, or we can end.
Did we want to talk about Satan? A note about
Satan, and we can.
Well, you wanted to mention a side note.
Oh yeah, I mean, my side note there was just if you guys dig into the Nephilim, you'll find a lot of channels on the subject. A lot of the stuff that gets lumped under Nephilim or Satan are it'll be encounters with fairies, it'll be visits with pagan gods, and Satan is not sending gnomes collecting acorns in your backyard, right? The very notion is ridiculous. Let's lay aside the question of whether or not Satan exists for those of you who don't believe in him, and just accept for the sake of argument that there is in fact a figure called Satan. If Satan wants to get you to accept evil, he's not going to do it by sending you gnomes dancing in a circle under the light of the moon. He's going to do it by telling you that you're such a great person or such a great Christian, if you're Christian, because you know that there are no gnomes dancing under the moon, or that because they're Satan. And I just bring this up because a lot of these channels are like, we knew it was Satan trying to tempt us to do our Bible study, but we were good Christians, and people will bring it up as if like, oh, they're reliable because they're Christian. It's like, not to say that they're not reliable, but that's precisely the worst type of reasoning you should be doing. From within a Christian perspective, too. Like, this is like half of Jesus's rants are about this exact topic. Most of the Pauline epistles about this exact topic. We get how many dozens and dozens of hundreds of quotes. But yeah, it's like, if we're talking about the Nephilim, why care about these ancient mysterious giants? It's because of these patterns of pride continue to affect us today. And if you have nothing else you want to say, I think we can call it here.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I will be back once more on Sunday to talk either about Bob the Builder or Kill la Kill. We're not sure which one yet. Probably Bob the Builder. I may upload a video on the Pursuit of the Ordinary in the meantime. In the interim, I am Wild Philosopher. If you liked this content, please like, comment, subscribe, send it to your friends, and have a wonderful evening.
Yep. See ya.